Some of the things I'm going to talk about today, I want you guys to get the message of I'm coming from a place of conviction, not just being a cocky asshole, because everything I talk about today, whether it be training, equipment, maybe a couple Pantera references, it's because I've done this stuff, okay? I've been there, I've done it, I've used it. When I have to go to a meet and train, this is the system I use. When my athletes had to go and compete and be successful, this is the system I use, okay? So when their ass was on the line, this is what I did. So please know that I'm coming from a place of conviction with all this stuff, all right? This is our room, and the same goes for the equipment. When I was given a blank check, 100K to do a room, guess where I went shopping, right? Because I knew that all this stuff is designed by people who train, not some egghead behind a computer. Okay, so this is the room I got to do, right? We had 2 monoliths, pretty badass for a college. I don't think many colleges have that. But to a point Dave talked about the other day on one of his posts, why wouldn't I do this? Because I can run 6 to 8. That was a big horsefly. I can run 6 to 8 athletes through a monolift, through a squat workout, no problem. Adjust the height up and down and just roll them through. So everybody wants to question, you know, well, what'd you do that for? That's why, okay? That's it for that. This is 14-year-old me. How I got any action in high school, I have no idea. The best thing that ever happened to me probably is my hair fell out. But my point is, at this point I had been training for about 2 years, and my dad kind of saw where my interests were going and what I was into, and he kind of mentioned to me that you can be a strength coach, like that's a thing. Like Dave talked about, like when he was younger it wasn't a thing. Well, when I was, right, a teenager, it was kind of starting to become a thing. So it was kind of from that point, like I was 14 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. Like that was it, I want to coach, I'm going to be in the weight room with athletes. So I set this goal, kind of went chasing it, you know, and then through high school I had all the resources you guys did. Muscle and fitness, flex, right? The bigger, faster, stronger maybe was okay, right? But we didn't have the internet. So went through high school, was trying every training method under the sun. Had some success, but that's easy early on, right? Anything you do your first 2 years is gonna help you out. So just trained hard, got better. Was lucky enough to go play D3 football, not a big deal, but to make it out of where I grew up and go to college athletics was kind of a big deal. But my point is, I'm gonna trip over this. It's gonna happen, just be ready. My point is, when I was in college, we didn't have a strength coach either. It was our O-line coach, printed out, I think what he did when he played there, like 10 years earlier, and the program was set out on the table, and like that was our program. So me being a 19-year-old kid, you got it. I told you it was big. It's a big-ass horsefly. So anyways, me being a 19-year-old kid, I knew better than everybody. And I was still researching, trying all sorts of different programs, everything like Husker Power, HIIT. I was still on the bigger, faster, stronger a little bit, and that's where my progress from that kind of ran out. Istvan, you guys ever Istvan Jordvik? There was this program called like Big Fun, and he had you doing like Olympic variants and step ups for 30 reps. It was crazy and really, really boring. That was just, like with all the stuff, like it was the same thing over and over. So anyways, I'm in college. It was my junior, going into my senior year. You guys remember Mike Allstott, fullback for the Bucks? Dude was like 260 and ran like a tailback. So I was like, who's this guy? What's he doing? I got to train like that. Because back then I figured, well, if I just train like that, then I can do what he does, right? Unfortunately, that doesn't always work out. But anyways, I started researching and I read an article where he was benching and squatting with chains. I'm like, okay, what's this chain stuff about, right? So I'm in college now. We finally got the internet. I go on the internet, found an article by Louis. I think it was how to bench 600 pounds easy, right? And I didn't understand gear at the time. Like I didn't understand that was in a bench shirt. So it was 600 pounds easy, holy shit. And then the next article that came up was Dave's Periodization Bible Part 2. And he talked about that earlier, which is kind of, if you read it, it's like the Conjugate for Dummies, right? So I read it, And everything kind of made sense. Like, yeah, here's your heavy stuff. You do some light stuff for speed, because light stuff just to do light stuff, like, never made sense, right? So I read that. Everything kind of made sense. Started messing around with it. Going into my senior year, felt really good, you know, so I figured, okay, this stuff's working. And it was fun, too, because you were changing stuff every week, right? So I go through my senior year of football, give myself about a week after the season, which I always did, and then I go back and I test my bench. And my bench was only like 15 pounds lower than right before the season, which is when you should be at your strongest, right? So, and if anybody's played football, you understand that's not usually how it goes. Like, usually you go in after the season and you pick up a plate and it feels like it's 300 pounds. So at that point, I was like, there's definitely something to this. And throughout the whole season, I felt faster, I felt recovered more than I ever had before. So it was at that point I knew I was kind of onto something, but at the same time, I'm just like a 20-year-old kid, you know, messing around with this stuff. So got out of undergrad. A few years went by. We were down in an area where there was no strength coaching jobs, so we moved up to Buffalo. I knew there were some people up there, or at the very least, I was going to get out of where I was. There was also like the Bills and the Sabres, so I had some options. Like, I had to get my foot in the door somewhere, right? So I did my grad work there, and actually, it's funny, I applied for a GA spot at the University of Buffalo, and I didn't get it. But whatever, I was in the program. We're going to go up. Did my grad work. Started going in and volunteering just to give it some experience, you know, even though I didn't get the job. Not bitter at all, but it actually worked out good. Excuse me. So did that. Did my grad work. Excuse me. Did my grad work. Got through that. Everything was kind of rolling, right? We're up here. I finished my grad work. Things are kind of coming into place, and things are working out the way I needed them to. And then about two weeks before, I was going to do my final internship at UB. Okay, so I got in, I got accepted, and my supervisor, which is kind of funny, my supervisor for my internship was the kid that got the GA spot over me, right? So, but it was cool. We were in grad school together, and we were friends and stuff. But so I'm about to start my final internship. I'm on the final step of this thing that I'm chasing, and we find out that the head guy, who I kind of knew of, who was associated with Elite a little bit, was leaving. So I'm like, oh, sweet, right? I've done all this stuff to get here, and now this guy's leaving. So anyways, started the internship, got it rolling, and I should back up a little bit. So from the time I read that article from Dave, like, I was on Elite all the time, right? Like, I was one of the guys. Okay, we got some younger people. Okay, so you didn't always have the option to take your iPhone to the bathroom with you. Okay, I know this is shocking. So in my bathroom was a stack of like Elite articles that I printed off, right, instead of magazines. So over the course of chasing this goal, like, I'm always on Elite reading and stuff. So then I start my internship. We go a couple weeks. Then we find out Buddy Morris, who was Coach X on Elite, was going to be the head guy. So I went from, oh, shit, to perfect, right? So things are working out. So did my internship, finished that up. After the internship was done, I had 6 more months of school left. So I just kept volunteering in the department, right? And it was that winter, Buddy actually offered me a job. So here we go. Like, I started this when I'm 14. I got there, I got offered a job. 2 weeks later, Buddy tells me he's leaving for Pitt. But it worked out because we had some good people there who got me in the door and supported me. So like, I did this thing, let's do some math, right? There's about 120 Division I schools in the country. Let's be generous and say there's 10 strength coach spots at each university. So I just nabbed one of 1,200 jobs in the country, right? So very cool. I went through, got my job. I was there. We'll talk about this in a little bit. But I was at a great spot, right? I achieved my goal. I did it. Now, for me to do that, there's 5 big factors that allowed me to do what I did, okay? my wife, anybody that's here as a coach or like a business owner, you know you have to have support at home, right? Like we moved to Buffalo, could barely afford the house. We fucking went anyways. She was down with it. So my parents were always cool, right? They didn't even disown me when I told them I didn't want to teach phys ed. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, so that was a rough conversation, but like I said, they didn't write me off, right? And then these last three were all because of Elite, right? All the knowledge and the people that I met through Elite allowed me to get that job. So to come around and stand here at the fucking S5 compound and talk to you guys about conjugate training is pretty damn cool, okay? So thank you for being here. It's very cool for me, all right? Now, let's see if I don't mess this up. In 1991, in communist Russia, I just skipped my slide. I'll get it. In 1991, in communist Russia, Monsters of Rock tour. I'm gonna kill you. Anyways, so I got a video of the concert, right? Pantera, a relatively new band, got to play in front of, and they don't really know how many people were there, but it's been said there was 1.5 million people through that concert that day. So this up-and-coming band got to play in front of 1.5 million people, right? Pretty damn cool. They played with AC/DC, Metallica. Metallica was just up here, right? Metallica just left the stage, right? So Pantera got to play as a young band in front of all these people. This is the banner that flew above the stage at that concert for them. It's also one of their t-shirts, right? Okay? So, me being a meathead, like everything goes back to weights and music and food and caffeine, Monster. This is my tribute band. These are my motherfuckers, okay? I'll put my motherfuckers against anybody's motherfuckers, all right? And the point of me doing this and saying this is, if you're gonna like get somewhere or do something, you gotta be around good people, okay? Go seek out good people, okay? Without these people, anything I say today doesn't carry any weight, right? Like, honestly, you know? So, just to go through this quick, Ryan Groneman, head guy down at Presbyterian right now. He is the best strength coach no one knows about. If we can get Ryan on or Groney, we call him the Groney, probably the craziest dudes you ever meet. If he could get on an NFL team and work with their O&D linemen, those guys would be faster, stronger, and feel better than they ever have. And I'll guarantee that. I'll guarantee it. So, and also, his strength coach when he was in college was Joe Kent. All right? So I went to this shitty little college, right, with all these people here that I got to learn from. So don't always go for the big, you know, pie in the sky, you know, lineup, right? You'll find something somewhere else. This guy, Paul Childress, was also on one of Dave's slides. Was a lifter in the WPO when multiply lifting was king. Maybe it'll come back, JP? Probably not. But was a world record holder for years. And all these people are very, very, very technically sound, and we're gonna get into that and how important that is. And that's another reason I was lucky to learn from these people. Like, coach their asses off, right? When people were in the room, coach their ass off, okay? So, was a world record holder for years in the 308 class. Came into UB about the same time I did. And he actually competed at the 2007 WPO, and we got to go up and be in the warm-up room, okay? So I'd kind of been exposed to Conjugate a little bit at this point. Like I said, I knew we were onto something. And then I went into the weight room, and I watched these guys standing up with 700, 800, 900 pounds like it's 135. Like, come down, flap, right? So, and then that, in my mind, I'm like, if I can get an athlete to do that, they're gonna be really fucking hard to deal with. You know what I mean? And it may not be 800 pounds, but like a college football player, if you can get them to stand up with 500 pounds with that much velocity on the bar, that's gonna be tough. So, being around him and getting to see that. And another point, seeing these guys move 6 and 7 plates on each side of the bar for their speed work. Like I knew what speed work was, I'd read about it, and then you go see that, and that's, okay, holy shit, that's what it's supposed to be like, right? So, Dave, of course, like I said, Dave's talked about this before, kind of be conscious of what you're doing, because you never know, one little thing you could say or help someone with can kind of change their trajectory. So like Dave, someone might say, wrote a stupid article. Well, the article definitely changed my trajectory, right? Like I read that article and it changed my view on training, and off I went. So pretty cool. Buddy Morris, one of the first strength coaches, or paid strength coaches in the country at Pitt in like 1978 or whatever. One of the best in the industry now. He's with the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, so, and then Julia Ladusky, who's here, was actually nice enough to let me come in and volunteer and stuff, and bug the shit out of her. And the rest of these people, quite a bit, like questions nonstop, right? I'm lucky they didn't kick me out, to be honest. So, surround yourself with good people, right? A lot of the stuff I talk about today, you're not going to find in research journals. This is a Jim Wendler quote. You want science and studies? Fuck you, I've got blood and scars and vomit. Okay, and not that research is bad, I don't want to be that guy. But this stuff hasn't been researched yet. And if it has, it hasn't been done correctly. I remember like chains and bands and stuff kind of got popular around early 2000s. Like you started to hear about it a little more. I actually used to read the NSCA journals back then, and it wasn't until like 05 or so where we actually saw some stuff published. And I remember there was one I read, and then I went back to the method section in the back, and they set the fucking chains up wrong. So like, my point is the research is a little bit behind where you guys are, like on the front lines, actually doing the stuff. And I think we all know that, like people that actually train and are in the weight room, you're gonna find this stuff out sooner than anybody behind a microscope or in a research coat. Okay. Before we get into the X's and O's, there's some stuff that's really important, okay? If you don't get this next little section right, fuck all the stuff Dave talked about, because it won't make a difference. They have to do the movements right, okay? And that's kind of a problem in our industry right now. Everybody wants to talk about movement. Is their movement proficient? But no one's watching the movement in the weight room, at least from what I'm seeing, because it looks pretty bad, okay? And it's very simple to fix. I was just talking with somebody, Chris, we were talking about this just a second ago. Like his 7-year-old son, he taught him to deadlift. So you're telling me you can't teach a Division I athlete to deadlift, or even box squat at the very least? It can be done, okay? You just gotta know how to do it. But like I said, you guys are here, I was around great people, so don't think that I'm preaching to the choir, right? I understand you guys you're here and you're getting it done. Simple technique number 1, box squat correctly, okay? If you guys want these, I'll give my email at the end and you can email me and I'll send it out. The first thing you have to do if you're gonna box squat correctly is set your height right. Okay, I see this on the internet all the time, the high box and all this other crazy stuff. So, in order to get your box height right, the first thing you got to do is work with a perpendicular shin angle. Dave talked about that a little bit with the knees being over the toes and stuff in the free squat. When we're box squatting, and I'm actually a little bit behind perpendicular, which is okay, all right? But make sure the shin is perpendicular, okay? And then the next thing you're going to do, you got to get their feet wide, okay? It's okay to do a close stance box squat once in a while for some variation. But overall, to bring the hips up and the hamstrings and the stuff that we really want to, because they're piss weak in those areas, you got to get their feet out wide, okay? And this is in an article I put up on the site too. So the 2 criteria for our athletes were, it's going to be a little uncomfortable for them, okay? They're going to want to be here because their hips are so weak, and you're going to say move your feet out, and they're going to do this, like an inch. They're going to move their foot out an inch, okay? So it's got to be a little uncomfortable, right? And the second criteria is their foot, it's going to be different for everybody because they're different heights. Their foot has to be out far enough so when they're on the box and they go to stand up, they can have some lateral pressure or horizontal pressure going out the side of their shoe. Okay, so those are the 2, and that's just your feet. That's how to get your feet right. okay? And we tell them this, when you're coaching a group, whether it be lifters or athletes, that's where you gotta be, okay? So now that we have the feet right, now we'll sit them down on the box, and when they're on the box, the crease of their hip and the top of their kneecap, if I draw a line there, that's gonna be parallel to the floor, okay? Parallel has nothing to do with knee angle. Forget that, okay? So now, if I go to a meet, is this gonna be parallel? Well, we're not working with power lifters, so don't worry about it. It depends on your federation, right? But for your athletes, this is pretty good. And you'll see this like with your bigger guys, like maybe some of your football players. They might have a little more quad coming up. Not me, I really don't have much quad. They might have some more ass or junk in the trunk. So it's gonna skew this line a little bit. So for your athletes, if their femur is basically parallel with the floor, you're doing pretty good. All right, so this would be fine if you're training some kids, all right? And most of the stuff I'm talking about is athletes, and a lot of it, like 99%, will have huge carryover to like an intermediate lifter. All right, you start getting advanced, you're gonna have to tweak it a little bit, but I'm trying to keep everything really, really simple, okay? So, get the box height set right. Why do we squat wide? That's why, right? There's so much of your time on an athletic field is spent with your feet out wide or outside your shoulders. You need to be strong there, okay? And another thing, if you squat wide, it's typically gonna bring up with your feet in close. It's gonna make you stronger in closer. But if you only stay in close and squat, and you try to go out wide, you'll get your ass kicked because the hip development isn't there, the hip and hamstring development, okay? So that's why we squat wide. And they're terrible at it, so that's where we spend most of our time. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Once they get proficient, we'll start mixing it up. But at first, we're gonna get out wide and get good at that, okay? Okay, so when we're box squatting, I might need help to play this video. I'm so mad that this worked and my Pantera video didn't. All right, so watch Sean here. All right, his feet are out wide enough where he can get a little bit of horizontal pressure going out, right? Next thing we're gonna watch is his shoulders coming up off the box. His shoulders come up first. So to stand up, watch him go down. His ass goes back first. It's a back and then an out movement because our hips go back and then our push out on our feet, okay? Get the lower body working right first, all right? And then once those things look good, then you can start working on the upper body like I talked about the shoulders. That would be the next thing. Make sure your shoulders are being driven into the bar instead of just standing up. It's not a leg press. And we'll watch it one more time. Watch his feet. You can almost see that pressure going out on his feet. He does a pretty good job. When he comes off the box, I'm saying. Open, push out. See it? Push out. That's why we wear Chucks. Don't get me going on Olympic shoes. Okay, so pretty simple, right? That's what we're looking for. If you can get your kids to do that and accelerate into the bar, or even your athletes, you're gonna be way ahead of most people. Okay, so these are like really simple things. If you can get them going and get them in place, you're gonna put yourself ahead of people. Because people don't teach this. The more I go around, you won't see this. Another option for speed squats that we found worked really well was squatting out of chains instead of the box. Kind of does the same thing, breaks up the concentric, eccentric. We'll make them more explosive because athletes draw on the stretch reflex their whole lives. They run and jump and play. Going from a dead stop to explosive movement is hard for them. But to me, in my mind, that's like 90% of sports, right? Is that everybody talks about first step quickness? Well, you're training that with this. You're also training to change of direction. Because what are we doing when we stand up? We're pushing out sideways. We never trained agility, unless coach made us, and all of our agility scores improved. And I think that's a big reason right there. So going out of chains, the way to set this up, So we had EliteFTS.com, collegiate line, power racks. And what you do is set your J cup up, right? And then we had the safety pins. We would put them in the rack. You can see. Then we would drape our chain over that and go in a couple links, and that would usually put them at about parallel. Okay? Now, these are harder. These are harder than a box squat. You'll get sore from this. So if they're not exactly parallel, that's okay, because it's going to beat their hips up a little bit. Like you might want to wave this stuff in and out, all right? But the feedback we got from the kids was really good. Like they felt really good after they were doing it. So like I said, if they're a little bit above parallel, it's okay, because it's pretty stressful. So watch, pause, and then watch his effort into the bar. Pause. Pretty good. Okay, so if you can kind of see that pop or that snap coming out of the chain, and then the same thing goes for off the box. If you can teach your kids that, that's going to help them. That's going to make them faster. That's going to make them run, jump higher, run faster. That stuff will help your max effort work have dynamic correspondence to the field. Okay, they have to learn how to flex fast. Technique 2, jump and land correctly. All right, Kyle, the big thing is here, keep your knees out. When you land, keep your knees out. When you take off from the ground, make sure your knees stay out. I'm repeating myself, right? Because that's how we squat. Okay, we'll get into that later. If you can coach one movement, you can coach the whole system. Okay, because we're going to see a lot of reoccurring themes is what I'm saying. So watch Kyle. Watch Kyle when he lands. Watch his knees. It's going to be quick. But we're see him kind of rotate in. They just kind of snap in real quick. Watch again. See that? But he lands good. He does a really good job landing. The knees are out, rolled out when he lands, right? Now, he did this. See him going again. He did this remotely. He did a video and sent it to me, so I wasn't there to fix him. But what you would do to fix that, so he's had, a true plyometric should be an involuntary thing, right? It's just a reflex. It happens. He's having to try too hard, so he's having to try to jump because his landing box is too high. So if we bring that down a little, like if we cue him and he can't fix his knees off the floor and that doesn't work, then we'll bring that box down a little bit and it should help. Okay, so we'll just make it a little bit easier. The whole point of box jumping and plyometrics is to get off the ground quick. It's not how high you're landing, all right? Here's another good example. Kelly does a nice job keeping her knees out when she jumps. And why do I say that though? Like everybody talks about glute activation, right? That's all anybody talks about. So if my knee is in, what is my glute not doing? It's not activating. Good, because it's supposed to externally rotate, right? So if my knee is in, I know that this isn't working, all right? If you guys have a question at any point, just raise your hand. Motherfucker. That's what happens when you have big, fat sausage fingers try to run a computer. All right, so watch her knees when she takes off and when she lands. She does a really nice job. Right? Off the ground quick. That's going to be like 90% of your cueing for jumps. Quick off the ground quick. Make sure your knees stay out. Pretty simple. Technique 3, scap retraction and depression. Most of us know this in here. Most of the coaches around the country don't. You watch people do rows or bench, they're rounded over like this, right? We always complain about our kids on the iPhone like this. So when you're doing movements in the weight room, strengthen these muscles. I don't need a volunteer. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Keep your shoulder blades together and down. So whenever we're doing pull downs, if I watch, this shoulder should not come up in my ear. It should be sucked down and put in my back pocket. So a row or a bench or any movement I do with my upper body is basically just my arm bending and straightening. We shouldn't see this, right? Now, once they get good at holding that position, like maybe after a month or so, then you can start programming in some movement. So one of the big things now is scapular mobility. Why not build that into your strength training? right? We do the same thing with box squat. Our feet are out wide, and we open our knees. A lot of coaches are complaining about athletes can't open their hips. In turn, we can't open up. So we work mobility into the box squat and train it with strength. Same thing here with your scap. So after they get the static hold, start programming in that roll, and then suck it down and go into your row, okay? But make sure they get the static stuff first. Now, I talk about upper body. That goes for lower body too, right? When I squat, I want that sucked down and locked down on my back. When I pull, I want it sucked down and locked down on my back, okay? Yeah.
Just with the scapular movement, like with pull-ups with like younger athletes, you see that happen a lot. What would you do to fix that? Would you do like a band-assisted pull-up? Would you do like negatives? Or what would you do to kind of fix that movement on the scapula?
So yes, with younger athletes doing pull-ups, they can't keep the scap locked down. What would I do to fix it? First, I would try to cue it, and then like you said, just make it easier. Make it so it's something they can handle. So yeah, like throw a band on or, yep. Train what you say you're training, okay? 90% of people want to do RDLs for their hamstring work. 75% of those do the fucking RDLs wrong. So you're not training what you're supposed to be training, right? That's what's great about this system and the movements that are popular in it. It's kind of dumbed down, right? Our kids are there to play sports and stuff. They're not there to be weightlifters, right? Or you have an intermediate lifter. Make the movement, like you just talked about, easier so they can handle it and you're training the muscles you're actually going after, okay? So that goes into this a little bit. I'll come back to this slide. So not that a RDL is bad, right? But if you're going to do it, make sure you're doing it right, okay? Make sure the low back's not rounding out. Make sure the knees roll out a little bit on the way down so you can actually get into the hips like you want. When I see an RDL being done here like this and like this, you're not doing glutes and hamstrings, right? You're stressing the shit out of your inner hamstring and adductor, okay? So not that that's bad, but if I'm in season or I'm getting ready for a meet and I'm getting beat up, hop on reverse hyper. Train the same musculature, dumb it down, and you're able to recover better, right? So if I'm working with athletes, I might see more of this in the off season, okay? Banded leg curl. I got ripped, somebody ripped me apart on, I put this up, seated band abduction, just press out on a band. Somebody said something like the 90s called and they want their exercise back. Like it's a fucking warm up, dude, relax. But we're doing what we're saying I'm gonna do, right? So make it simpler so they can handle it. Thompson hips, that's a really good one. That's Donnie Thompson. Glute ham raise, right? It's kind of hard to screw up. That's what I like about all these. Okay, so if I got a room full of 30, 40, 50 kids, go do banded leg curl for a set of 30 or 50. I don't care how shitty they are at it, their hamstrings are gonna get smoked after that, right? So it's easy. So this is a little blurry, I apologize. I couldn't find a better image. It's Charlie Francis's motor unit recruitment chart. Okay, so it breaks down the amount of motor units recruited for different movements. All right, now the big thing everybody talks about in the industry right now is motor unit recruitment, which good, yes. The difference between a good athlete and a great athlete is the ability to recruit those motor units, okay? So down here on high recruitment end, we have clean and jerk, snatch, I'm not sure what that is, maximal sprints, explosive med ball work, plyometric work, okay? All is up around 80% of total motor unit recruitment, so that's good. Those are things we want, right? But keep in mind, with motor unit recruitment also comes motor unit cost, okay? So you can't have your whole program, Husker Power, be up in this area, right? You can't have if you're working with athletes or somebody has to recover, don't squat, then RDL, then reverse lunge, then, okay, all big, huge compound movements, mix it up, okay? Come down here for some of your accessory work, and then here for your prehab work. All right, does that make sense? Or if I'm in season, like instead of an RDL that would be up here, I'll go back extension or reverse hyper here. and still get done what I need without kicking the shit out of everybody. All right? Now, I'm also going to say deadlift and squat are down here at like 70, 65%. I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure that when they tested this, it was just a percentage of their max and they had somebody kind of do the movement. They were not trying to accelerate the bar. If they were trying to accelerate the bar as fast as they could, it would be up here, probably about 90%. Okay? So like I said before, if you can get your kids to accelerate the weight and push hard, you're doing well. Accelerate the bar, right? I've already said it 5 times. Now, this is a good indicator. We'll talk about this in a little bit too. When you're teaching your kids how to squat, you're teaching them with a bar, and like what we would do just speed work for like 2 or 3 weeks. All right, I think Dave might have talked about this with somebody who's having form issues. So we did kind of the same thing to introduce max effort work. But I knew once, like even if it was day 1, if those kids started standing up off the box with a little bit of snap and a little bit of pop, like that first video we watched of the squat, that's when you know they're kind of getting it and it's starting to click a little bit, okay? And you'll also see that if they're doing something wrong and then you cue them and then they get that snap, that's how you know everything's working right, right? Not so simple technique. Teach your athletes how to train. This is, with the system, I had enough faith in the system that I knew I didn't have to be a drill sergeant or be all over the athletes all the time, right? Because we had pretty good kids that did a decent job training, and I knew the rest would take care of itself because I had that much faith in the system, okay? Now, on top of that, teach them to train, and you're golden, okay? I don't care if you have a room full of 50 kids. We had 50 swimmers in the room every Saturday morning, men and women, and I knew they would do a good job because they got to the point where they understood how to train, all right? I think a big part of learning how to train, like people bitch about the millennials and stuff, a lot of that is just they don't know better. Like really, they played their sport their whole life, they've never done anything really hard, right? So you got to kind of show them what that is. So whether that's time sets or working one-on-one with a kid for a day and kind of showing them, you know, you go to near failure on stuff, okay? But those kind of things will have, because if they learn to train, everything else is on autopilot. Like you can just coach and correct stuff like it's supposed to be, right? Like I understand you have to motivate a little bit, but get them to learn how to train and you're good. I'll go back to that. So in order to teach your kids how to train and have buy-in, that's what everybody talks about, right? Target the kids that have bought in and use them, all right? I always use Robert as an example. I'll go back. No, I'm not gonna go back. The kids that are successful may be able to get to some kids that you can't. Or this may be true in a training group too. Like you may tell this guy he has to do this 10,000 times and then he has to hear it once from someone else and it clicks. Right? Sometimes you just got to hear it from someone else. Your kids that buy in and do a good job, let them be advertisers for your system. All right? And that'll just kind of happen on its own. Because the kids that train hard and work hard are going to be more successful and they'll win, and then the other kids kind of see it and hopefully will follow. All right? I think you have to train. Like, why the fuck are you doing this if you don't like to train, right? Why are you in a weight room? And I've seen this before with coaches, and the kids knew how they felt about training and knew they didn't train, and you could see there was a lack of buy-in, and that was part of it, okay? If you can, teach them, don't make them, right? So teach them how to train, teach them how to succeed, and they'll buy in more. If they're just doing stuff because you're a drill sergeant and you're running their ass on the ground and all this other stuff, you're not really getting anywhere, okay? Now, I understand there's gonna be certain groups with certain dynamics where you have to kind of drill sergeant them, right? But if you have to do that on the front end, transition it to where they learn it and then want to do it, okay? Like we had one group I had to be on, like they couldn't go from this rack to this rack without being fucking distracted. Like somewhere in between there that went like this. So like keep them in the same place. So I just went, like you said, like go real simple. So we would do time sets, and there was a group of 5 on a rack, and they weren't allowed to move from the rack except to that next exercise. But there was 5 guys on 5 little stations on a rack, and it was 1-minute sets of everything. So it was like band pushdowns, seated band rows. Seems pretty elementary, but it worked because it's real simple. You do something for a minute, it's gonna suck and stimulate some muscle growth. So you're getting everything you need, right? But then you gotta use that as a learning opportunity to show them later on, okay guys, like, let's get the training wheels off and then you can start rolling along, all right? This is a tough one. Bring along the weak links, but don't spend all your time on them. You're gonna have turds. You're gonna have people that don't listen. You know, in a private sector, you know, maybe you can kick them out. In a school setting, you can't do that, right? You gotta deal with them. Do everything you can. You know, maybe talk to some of their teammates or somebody that might have some information on something that's going on with them, right? There's, like, my wife's a school psychologist, and usually asshole kids have an asshole parent or something, right? So it's not just, the kid's not just being an asshole to be an asshole, right? There's something, try to figure out what it is, do the best you can, but at some point, like, you might have to spend less energy on them. Because those 2 kids that are a pain in the ass, if you let them, will consume you, right? What is it, the 5% will consume 95% of your energy or whatever? So, as a last resort, spend your time on the people that want to train, okay? Reward effort, not superstar performances. And I've seen this, and it drives me nuts, like with football. Like, you got a kid who's really good athlete, really successful, walks, but doesn't train hard, like doesn't do shit in the weight room. But he walks in and the strength, like there's a workout going on, and the strength coach goes over and wants to fucking bro hug him and talk to him and kiss his ass while the workout's going on, right? But what happens then? All you guys that are training hard see that, see me over there kissing Johnny's ass, and you're like, fuck, what are you doing, right? So that takes away from your buy-in, because eventually, or at some point, they're gonna work for you. They will want to work for you, and they will put effort into their training for you. But if you do stuff like that, it'll never happen, right? Because it's a bad message. So reward effort. Even if the kid sucks at their sport, that's not your concern. You're a strength coach, right? Reward effort. You know that what goes on the field is not, let the coach worry about that stuff. So I talked about your kids that buy in, use them for like advertisement and to bring other kids in. This is Rob, he was one of our throwers. He bought in, did a great job, and then his senior year he interned for me, and I had a group of female sprinters who, they were good kids, they did okay job, they were never disrespectful or like a big problem, but things weren't really clicking for them. So Rob interned, and I was like, will you go work with them and try to, like, I don't know what to do, you go try, right? And it was like day 2, everything cleaned up, and they did a great job and started training harder. So use those kids. Rob was like 5'9" or 10, he was a shot putter, right? He's kind of in a sport of giants, but just because of his effort, he was able to, like, he was a multiple-time All-American. Actually went to Olympic trials and made finals. So he was like this little dude, not little, he's like 260, but this short guy was in finals with Reese Hoffa in the Olympic trials. So that was pretty cool. So like guys like that, lean on them, okay? And then later he threw post-collegiately a little bit, and he moved to Ohio and earned himself a key to West Side. So pretty fucking cool, right? And then he got a picture with Chuck. Okay, I have to explain this because not everybody knows who Chuck is. Go in the weight room over there and there's a giant mural of this. This guy is that guy. One of the most intense power lifters ever. Like, he walks into a meet and everybody kind of looks away, one of those guys. But Rob doesn't care, he just goes up and throws his arm around him and grabs a picture, right? So lean on those guys, okay? Or those kids. Bonus. My original presentation was 6 things, so here's your bonus. Verbal cues. You have to tell your athletes or your lifters how to do it, not what to do. Okay? Someone's trying to stand up out of a squat, and you're gonna stand there and scream up, 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 up. Right? No shit, they know that. Like, at some point there's a place for that, right? But you have to get around good people, like you've done, you're here, I get it, good job, okay? And learn that stuff so you can help your athletes. Because what that does is gives them the proper movement, and then everybody wants to talk about proper neuromuscular firing patterns. When they lift right, all that shit happens and takes care of itself. So if you can cue them and get them to do the lift right, all that other stuff takes care of itself. So instead of up, 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 they may have to arch their back, or tuck their elbows, or drive their knees out, drive their head into the bar. Those are the things you got to watch for and figure out, okay? So the cheerleading type stuff, right, there's a place for that, but at some point you got to help them figure it out, right? Like Dave said, there's a delay, so it might not always happen right away, but it's got to be there. You got to help them figure that out. Okay, so we're going to go into a little bit about why the conjugate model, why with athletes. Okay, we can raise multiple traits throughout the year, okay, by training multiple traits within the week, all right? So we have all these things like speed, reversal strength, change of direction. We can help push all those athletic traits all year with this system, because during the training week, we're training different traits on the strength curve. We'll see that in a little bit, okay? Does that make sense? Whereas a linear model, where we talked about earlier, I might train strength endurance for 4 weeks, right? Like all sets of 10, okay? And then I go over to my next 4 weeks, and then I'm doing sets of 6 to 8, right? Then I'm getting closer to my true strength. And then I come over here. So I'm coming up on week 12 now, right? Is everybody with me? I'm coming up on week 12. Now I'm starting to do 3s and 5s. I'm starting to feel real strong. But I lost all that shit from week 1 by now. Whereas with this system, you can push everything, okay? You have to prioritize, okay? Everything is not going to raise in a linear fashion all the time, but you can stay on and not have that detraining effect, okay? And you guys all know this, because if you train sets of 10 for 4 weeks, right? And then I go through my second month, 6 to 8s, and then I go here where I'm on 3s to 5s. You know, if you go back there and you try to do the same weight you did in week 2 for a set of 10, you're going to fucking die. It's going to be terrible, right? So you know that that happens. We all know that. Research may not tell us that, but we know it. Let's talk about that. The conjugate model is not a powerlifting program. It's not. Louis took it and adapted it and used it and has been very successful with it with powerlifters, but it was originally designed to train Olympic athletes, okay, in the old communist Soviet regime, right? Same place Monsters of Rock happened in 1991. Don't tell me the Matrix isn't real. So it was really designed for athletes of multiple sports to use to get better at their sport. Louis just took all this stuff and put it on his lifters, and it fucking worked, right? Okay? So there's always that. There's always, well, isn't this for power lifters? No. Yes, it works for power lifters, absolutely. But originally, simplest means possible. Most of your movements are very simple in the system. Like we touched on this a little bit earlier, right? You're athletes. They're not weightlifters, they're not power lifters. Give them the simplest means possible to reach their end goal, okay? Which is be a better football player, basketball player, whatever sport it may be. And here's a little secret. Your programming for those 3 athletes that I just talked about doesn't have to be that different. It can be really, really similar, and you'll do pretty damn good if you do these things right. And that speaks to this too. Any movement can be used to develop power if the load and the speed and the intent on the bar is correct. So like I talked about earlier, if you get your kids to push hard and fast on a bar, then you can manipulate the loads and get the training effect you want. Okay? So even on heavy stuff, push hard and fast on the bar. That's athletics. Any program will work if your athletes train hard. To a point, yeah, right. I hate this. I hate this. I've heard people say it. If this is true, why is there a fucking strength coach in the room? Right? Why not do it like I had to do it in college and just throw a piece of paper out and fucking let them go? Or have the sport coach do it, right? Like, any coaches in here? Raise your hand. Okay, all of us coach at some level or another. If this is true, how much does that fucking devalue what you do? Like Dave talked about earlier, not taking credit for your athletes. I agree, but the stuff's important, right? We can't just throw stuff out. These are some of the accomplishments our kids had. I would never say that they did what they did because of something we did or the programming, but I do believe if they were on a different program, some of these probably wouldn't have happened, okay? And like some of these, I know they wouldn't have happened. I know that because the fucking kids told me so, okay? And that's not to brag on anything I did, it's the system. Anything I say like good is about the system. Please know that, okay? We also had athletes who left the system, okay? Have you guys seen the preview for the West Side documentary? A couple? Okay, if you see the part where Louis says, you're on solid ground when you're at West Side, once you step out that door, you're on quicksand. Athletes that left this system, no one improved. And I fucking sat down one day and I tried to think, who got better? Who left because a coach wanted them to leave or the athlete thought they were, which I was fine with. If the kid did a good job and they want to go try something else, okay, go ahead. No one got better. They all fell off. Cal Dietz talked about that a little bit. Once you're training at a certain level of intensity and other factors, once you come down from that, your performance will decrease. Okay? So that's why we do it. All right. There is a shift in our industry away from strength. Okay? This is a fucking NFL player at the combine. Now, I would rather have my O-lineman look like this, right? I think we can all agree on that, all other factors being equal, okay? Now, I understand there's a lot of factors, right, that go into these two pictures. It's not just training program alone, but here's my point. If you are not doing some heavy-ass hard training, you have no shot at getting to this direction, right? If I'm doing all functional movement screen and one leg RDLs with a 10-pound dumbbell, I have no shot at getting my kids towards this, right? Okay. You know, it's like the biggest, strongest, the best athletes in the world are big, strong people. Serena Williams, LeBron James, Tiger Woods is pretty big for a golfer, right? There's outliers, but for the most part, they're big-ass people. They might not be good weight room people, but why not try to shift your kids towards that? Like that's kind of your job, right? You're in physical development, push them towards that so they have a shot, right? There's only a few LeBron James, I get that, but get stronger, get bigger, it will help you. All right, what's next? We talked about this a little bit, so just real quick, this is a force velocity curve. I think a lot of you have seen this. So if I have real high force up here, my velocity is going to be low, right? I have a heavy weight up here. It's going to move slower, but my intent still has to be to move that as fast as I can, okay? Back to Charlie Francis' motor recruitment chart. You got to push hard and fast, even if it's heavy, okay? Try to lift a heavy load slow. It ain't going to happen. Try to jump up on a high box slow. It's not going to happen. But back to my point, we can push all these up and to the right with the conjugate model, okay? Whereas traditional linear, we may push this one up for a little bit, but then I'm gonna train for 4 weeks, and this one comes back down while this one goes up. Okay, does that make sense? So we're training multiple traits within the week so we can push all that stuff up. I don't need to talk about that. Some of this stuff Dave touched on, so I'm not gonna, I know you always want pizza. I'm not gonna stay on it too long. How am I doing on time? Got about an hour. Nope. Okay, so kind of some X's and O's, how to put this stuff in place, okay? Dave brought this up when I was down here last year, and it just totally made sense. I'd always kind of thought about the method this way, but I never really explained it. And he said, well, all your things are different lanes, and they're just separated. So like right here, this is your whole system, right? This is it. Now this could be, I have, whether it's max effort or speed, this is your training plan. Do your tissue prep. So we would roll out or get a softball into the pecs, shoulders, right? Kind of do something to get the tissue moving right and relax and push a little blood in there. Then we're gonna warm up, okay? We didn't do a lot of dynamic warm-up stuff because I feel like, one, they have to do that all the time anyways. Like if they could do anything with their sport coach, they're doing dynamic warm-up. And two, whenever we do this, they do a pretty shitty job at it. Like it's kind of a waste of time. You know, like they're supposed to do leg kicks and they're talking and this and that. So for us, warm-up, we would do like for lower body, would be light reverse hyper, maybe some abs, a couple sets of 20 or 15. If it was upper body, a couple sets of like posterior shoulder and triceps. We're just trying to push some more blood to the area. We're not gonna spend, this was like 5 minutes, okay? And then we had our jump or throws lane. So on a lower body day, it would be jumps. Most of the time we jump up to a box. We didn't do a true plyometric like we saw with Kyle, the kid's knees that were caving in. We didn't do that very often unless we were getting ready for conference or their most important time of the year. All right? Don't, I feel like if you go to the well too often, you kind of get diminishing returns. So pull out your ACE card when you need it, and that's your plyometrics for a speed athlete. Okay? And another reason we can jump up to a box and do a lot of volume without beating them up. Okay, everybody talks about central nervous system. We're going to spare the central nervous system by jumping up and landing instead of coming down. Okay? Okay. So, and then for upper body, it was a throws lane, like a med ball throw. Like a rotational throw into the wall. Just come up and slam it down as hard as you can. Any upper body variation. Lay on your back, throw it up in the air, have a partner catch it. Okay? Just something fast, high neural demand to get them warmed up. Okay? Then your max effort or your speed lane. Okay, whatever a day it may be, max effort or speed. Whatever your movement may be, plug it in there. And then you go. Your accessory lane, your accessory work, basically bodybuilding stuff, right? Like Dave talked about, don't go crazy with a lot of the bodybuilding methods, but you're just building tissue. You're trying to build the body to be ready for whatever it has to be ready for, okay? And then mobility or reset. Again, you could go back to some of the tissue prep. Like if you have a kid with some issues in the shoulder, go back and do more work, and then reset, just like lengthen the tissue back out. If you like static stretching, that's fine. I like, I was real big on the old Dick Hartzell stuff, like for the hips, the band mobility routine. You can go on YouTube and find that. And then he also had like a shoulder traction thing where you put the band up on the rack, goes around your wrist, and it sucks your shoulder joint out to kind of open that back up. Okay, it really helps things relax. We did dead hangs, stole that from Joe DeFranco. Just go on a pull-up bar, it totally relax your shoulder, right? Let that, like we talked about not doing earlier, let your shoulder suck up into here and just hang and let things open up and re-lengthen, okay? Well, that's it. Just plug the shit in and you're good. Because the way it's set up, if you use a lot of the movements that are popular and that kind of skeleton, the work's done. Like, we know it works. That's part of the problem that I see with this. Like I run a modified West Side or a modified Conjugate. Why? What's wrong with it? Just use it. Quit messing with it. And that, Dave talked about, you won't hear me say West Side ever. The reason for that is I'm not there, right? I haven't earned the right to use that word in my mind. You know, Dave talked about giving credit to Louis, which obviously what Lou has done is awesome, right? And I talk about that in my book a little bit. But if you don't hear me say West Side, that's why. Like, I'm not down there training. I don't sacrifice what they've sacrificed, so I don't deserve to. So now we'll break it down a little bit more. Ed Miller down at the Rack, they have a gym down in Atlanta. I was down there a couple weeks ago. Awesome gym, and he said this, like the system is plug and play. It's really that simple. Like go through your lanes, plug something in, and you're good. Now, once your athletes and your lifters get more advanced, you can put more thought in, right? And we can progress and make things harder. But when you're first starting, so for a second pressing movement, just do a pressing movement that's different than your max effort movement. You don't need to sit there and think about it for 20 minutes. Like, okay, one of the best things Buddy ever told me was, you should be able to justify every set, rep, and movement in your program. I totally agree. But he would sit there and analyze that fucking program. Like he would come in Sundays and work on it for hours, and then we would come in Monday morning and it was still, right, in his office on his pad and pen, like, you don't have to do that. For most of the people, for 90% of the people that we'll see, don't have to do that. Okay, so then I'm gonna do a row to my stomach, then I'm gonna do a tricep, then I'm gonna do a shoulder. Most of the emphasis is gonna be on the rear delt to help keep the shoulders healthy, right? We get a lot of anterior shoulder from our pressing movements. So we're gonna go rear shoulder to help keep those healthy. Throw some traps in there, throw some abs in, and some biceps. Plug and play, it's really that simple. Now, start out easy and progress, okay? And it doesn't have to be sport-specific progression, just from a movement difficulty. Treat your athletes or your lifters like lifters. Think about what movement's harder and then progress them along as you go. And that's one way to ensure kind of constant progression. Does that make sense? Okay. Lower, we do our max effort, our dynamic, and then we go, so second barbell, okay? This could be a good morning, it could be a pull. On speed day, it could be speed pulls, it could be a kettlebell swing. I'm just gonna plug and play, right? But as you're going along, put a little thought into it. You know, where are we at in the season? What's their schedule like? Do they need to be recovered? We're gonna train the hamstring from a hip extension standpoint, right? We're gonna train the hamstring from a knee flexion standpoint. That's it, just throw them, put them in. Single leg, I think it's good to have once a week in there for athletes. You don't have to go crazy with it. Like, anytime your program goes too far in one direction, kind of reel it back in. Like if, you know, somebody might have a program that's all kettlebells. No, you need to reel it back in. Somebody might have a program that's all single leg stuff. No, come on, pull it back in. Somebody might have a program that's all max effort stuff. No, right? Go back to Charlie Francis's chart. Train all along that, okay? Put some of everything in. Single leg, groin or hip flexor needs to be done at least, you know, once a week, okay? So we're trying to train their hips and their glutes and their hamstrings, so we're getting all this work out here and all this work for all this stuff back here. Like, you gotta get in the front a little bit too, right? Like when I say hips, I'm talking about the whole hip girdle, basically. So some groin and hip flexor stuff. Dave talked about hanging leg raises, good. We used to drape a chain over the knee, right? And just stand and pull and just push some blood in there. Nothing crazy. Lay on your back and put a band around your knee and then around your back and then around the other knee. So like the Suzanne Summers thing where you're squeezing your knees in. It sounds stupid, but we had like no groin issues. Okay? That leads me to another point. Everybody wants to do ACL prevention programs. Just train right. Back to what I talked about at the beginning, do your movements right, and all that stuff takes care of itself. We had one ACL in 8 years. It's because we trained a lot of hips and a lot of hamstrings. That's it. You don't have to have a special, you know, just train right. Just train right and everything will take care of itself. It's really that simple. What Groney used to say, it's not that hard. The first bald guy I talked about on there, it's not that fucking hard, and he's right. Okay, the 3 methods. Dave talked about this, so I won't spend a lot of time. Max effort method. Now, Dave talked about the big thing is learn to strain, right? Or strain. So that could be different for your population. If you have a lifter that's not ready for true max effort work, maybe they do a set of 2 or a set of 3, so they're straining by the end of that last rep, okay? If you have a very low level, like maybe female cross country, max effort for them might be like 65 pounds on a bar, or a kettlebell squat, right? It's something hard that they have to strain and kind of grind through a little bit, okay? So it's going to be different for everybody. Whenever possible, I like to get them to true max effort work. I think there's a ton of benefit to that. You know, CNS inhibition, it teaches them to compete, right? Like they don't know what they're coming into, and then they just have to, you know, come in and try to beat all their teammates on whatever movement you pick. Dave had a really good argument. One of the biggest arguments against true max effort work is it's only one rep, so there's not enough time under tension, right? Which kind of makes sense if you think about it. But if you actually watch somebody, they're under tension for a long time. An advanced lifter will be under tension even longer because they're set up and getting tight and locked into the bar and all those other things. They're actually under tension for 20, 30 seconds. Now the actual rep might only take maybe 5, but all those other, the rest of that time, there's 20 to 30 seconds of time under tension. Also, you'll see what strength are athletes terrible at, or young lifters. Isometric strength, right? They're all floppy and wobbly and fucking wiggly. Max effort work will fix that. Because if I'm doing a max single on a squat and I got to grind through for 5 seconds, I guarantee your core is engaged, right? Everybody will say engage your core. This from here to here is tight. So you're getting your training objective, right? So that argument goes out the door. So if I could get them to true max effort work, I always tried to, okay? Dynamic effort, speed work. I just called it speed work. Whatever, move the weight fast. It's lighter weights, move it fast. Repetition method is kind of that middle ground on the Charlie Francis chart, right? Just do reps, just do work, build some tissue. That's all you're doing. Now, most programs only utilize 2 and 3, right? A lot of programs, it's like a Olympic lifting with bad bodybuilding. That's what we see a lot of, okay? With this, we're hitting all 3, and that's what allows us to push that force velocity curve up, all right? Mel Siff, one of the greatest minds ever in our field, said max effort strength is the mother of all special strengths, okay? So if your max strength is higher, all your other special strengths can come up because it puts kind of a ceiling on this. So if we talk about like our sporting abilities, like change of direction, reversal strength, quickness, those are all governed by max effort work. So max effort strength comes up, my special strengths come up. The special strengths are precursors to your athletic abilities. So if I pull these things up, that's the fastest way to raise your sporting abilities, is get stronger. Max effort work, okay? But you got to do these other things too, and they got to play the sport, right? You can't just be a lifter and be a better football player. You got to do everything. All right, so just real quick, here's a good example of a max effort. It's going to be heavy and it's going to be slow. Just real simple, right? That's a deficit pull, 1 inch, I think. Right? So as a grinder, okay? But here's the thing. I saw this with our baseball guys. Once they learned how to do that, their strength went fucking like it took off. And that's a lot. There's a lot of carryover to sports, right? If I can learn to hold a position and not shut down, because somebody who's not trained for very long and doesn't do max effort work, there's no way they're going to pull on that bar that long because their brain tells them, we talked about inhibition earlier, their brain tells their body to shut down. So an O lineman, instead of fighting through and holds his position and pass pro, guy gets him by the neck, he's going to fold over, right? So that's where your carryover is. Now, one coaching point, watch his low back. He had been in the system for a while, and I knew he could handle this, and he'd done the pre-work. Watch his low back a little bit. Not optimal, right? So if he was a younger lifter who had just started the system, had only been going a couple months, I would have shut him down like 2 sets before that, right? But he had been in like 2 or 3 years, done a ton of reverse hypers, had a strong low back. I know as long as that bar keeps moving, he's going to be okay. right? Because he's experienced enough to know something's not right, I need to drop the bar, okay? But somebody new, shut him down.
How would you go about like grouping those benefits? Where I did my internship, we would have seniors and freshmen together like in the same rack, which I didn't think was optimal because you got a kid that like, hasn't done that, and then you got a kid like that who's experienced. Would you put seniors for seniors, or what?
So he's asking, how do we do that in a group setting? Like if I have seniors that can do that and freshmen that can't. I like having the older guys with the younger guys if you can, if you have the coaching to do it. So if you can have those racks supervised, or you can train your seniors to watch the younger guys and shut them down a little earlier, I think that would be optimal. But if you can't do that, yeah, then separate them. And we'll talk about that in a second, kind of how we put max effort work in. Here's a reverse band deadlift. Just watch it for him. Watch her knees. Knees stay out. It's hard. She's got to strain through it, but she's holding a good position and stays on it. Good, right? She'd been in the system for a while. Did a nice job. And that's the thing. Watch their positioning. If they're holding their position and the bar is still creeping along, let them go. Okay? But if you start to see like a hip start to drift out or something like that, grab it. I'm talking about a squat, right? Okay? But technically, if they're looking okay, it's okay to be really fucking hard. That's what we want. All right? Another point, I talked about programming earlier, programming for different athletes. Kelly was one of our pole vaulters, national level, about 125 pounds. She did basically the same program that our 330-pound national champ shot putter did. Okay, so do I need to spend hours and hours and hours on writing different programs for people? No, we're just trying to increase their power output. We're trying to make them more explosive, right? That's it. So the differences in her programming were a little more mobility, more volume on box jumps, and not quite as much volume on accessory work. Okay? But those were the big differences. And she didn't blow up to 200 pounds jacked out of her mind. Right? We know that doesn't happen. Okay, putting in max effort work with inexperienced lifters or athletes. We touched on this a little bit earlier. Just do dynamic work. Okay? Do speed work for 2 to 3 weeks. At the end of that, you can start working them up a little bit for probably a couple more weeks and just shut them down early. Okay? Work them up. You see the form break down a little bit, cut them there. You're done. Okay? And then in a couple weeks, you'll probably be ready for true max effort work where they get to strain on something. All right? So what we did, so let's like pretend it's day one. Day one, we bring everybody in. We get them up on the squat rack. We show them how to squat, right? The box squat picture I had earlier. Show them how to set everything up. Show them how to do it. And then we break them off into their groups. Go out onto the racks. Everybody does the bar for 10 to 20 reps. Okay, part of your warm-up. And then you got to kind of adjust their speed weight. So work up to your speed weight. Let's say it's men's basketball. Not real strong, right? Okay, so they go do their bar for 10 to 20, then they're going to put a 25 on. After the bar, all your sets are just 2 reps. It's a speed set, dynamic work, right? Boom, boom, 1, 2. After that, everybody's going to put a plate on, and everybody's going to stay there until I come around or the other coach comes around and tells you to go up. So we might do sets of 2 speed squat for 20, 30 minutes. Do the speed work until most of the room has it down. You know, like 75, 80%, okay? But as you're going around coaching and they're doing those sets of 2, adjust their weights. So like one guy might be stuck at a plate. He might be there, and the other guy might be at 185, okay? But those are gonna be their training weights for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then every lower body day is a speed workout for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you start progressing them. So what that does is, we have sub-maximal weights, but we push on it as hard and fast as we can. We can get super maximal force production, right? Because our weight is down a little bit, but my acceleration is way up. So I'm getting a training effect on day 1. Okay, I didn't have to spend a month teaching them to do a hang clean, right? we're training. We're off and running, we're getting a training effect, and they're learning, they're getting high quality reps and practice at the movement. Everybody talks about movement and movement proficiency. You're doing it, okay? Our speed work was varied a lot. Anywhere from 30 to 70% of max. Now, like I said, push hard as fast as you can. This varied most of the time for most of our athletes in off-season work was around 50%. We would work 50 to 60%. I like to put accommodating resistance on as soon as you can. So we go back to that the break-in phase, like the speed work, as soon as most everybody, like usually around week 2. Okay, most people don't like they don't do that. I think a lot of people will say save the bands and chains. I think put it in there as long as it's scaled. You have to scale it down. Okay, why not get the training effect? You just have to lower the level. Okay, so if I have a 200-pound squatter, they might have mini bands on the bar instead of the gray average band. So it's scaled, right? But there's no, if they're proficient at the movement, there's no reason you can't use that stimulus. So typically off season would be 50 to 60%, which puts us right in the middle of that force velocity curve that we had up there earlier, right? That puts us right in the middle. So that's general training. Now, I talked earlier about prioritizing. So what we would do is when we're trying to get ready for conference or regionals or whatever their big event was, like for a team sport, it might be playoffs. So when I'm going into a playoffs with a team sport, I want them moving faster. So we do the same thing in the weight room. I'm going to drop their bar weight down. We might work between 30 and 40%, but we're going to increase band tension, okay? Because band tension is going to speed them up even more, right? It's faster down, faster up. So we go less bar weight, more band tension, more neurological stimulus. We're pushing our training towards the traits that we want, okay? I was never a big fan of a big long training plan for like 20 weeks because I don't know if I'm on week 1, I don't know where they're going to be at week 20. I know where we want to go and where we need to guide things, but you don't know. So to sit down and plan it all out never made sense. Sets and reps, like Dave said, it's a wide variety. You can do a lot of stuff, right? Originally, it was 8x2 and 8x3. Does anybody know why it was 2 reps and 3 reps? Yep, you got it. You get a free t-shirt, maybe. I gotta make sure I can make that happen. Hold on. So yeah, so for squat, it was 2 reps because that was the amount of time it took to complete a competition squat. So originally your dynamic effort work was based off of a time factor, right? And then the bench was 3 reps. So if you think an O-lineman is more beneficial for him to push for the time it takes to do 5 reps, put it in there, okay? Like the percents are guidelines, these things are guidelines. Now 6x3 is something you might do in season, right? Bring the volume down, you're still getting your stimulus, but you're not kicking the crap out of them. 10x2, that'd be something you see in off season. Okay, we like to push pretty hard in the off season, try to make a big difference, but that's a lot of work, okay? So do it when they don't, you know, this is gonna be something you're gonna do when they don't have a game on the weekend, yeah.
With something like bench press, would that be touch and go or pause type work or speed work?
So for speed work, would bench press be touch and go or pause? Do both.
Yeah.
Right? Just vary it up. It's a good way to switch it up. It's a good variance. Now when you're thinking about that, think about what the athlete needs. What type of contraction do they need? So for their sport, is pausing that on their chest and then snapping up as hard as they can, is that more specific to their sport? And I hate that term, but you know, so the pause, if that's closer to their sport, that's something you would use closer to their season. And then in their off season, the touch and go type thing. Okay, good question. Yeah?
Did you do any 15 or 20 set, say squats, Lactate, type training with guys?
On speed days?
Yeah.
So did we do any lactate type training on speed days? We, for the most part, we tried to keep the rest pretty low. And then he asked, did we do any sets of like 15 or 20? Not usually. The one thing that we did that was close to that was timed sets. So for track, we would do time-specific work, and we'd put them on belt squat. We also did it with a bar. You can do it with a bar. But you would belt squat and we put a band on it, and it would be event-specific. So like a 200-meter runner might squat for 22 seconds, as many reps as they can, 22 seconds, right? I just clicked my thing. No? Okay. An 800-meter runner fucking squatted for 2 minutes. But, and I stole that from Louis, but the person that wins the race is the person that slows down the least, right? So if you can keep that going, and that was the feedback we got, like my race is easy now. So we got what we were trying to do. And we didn't put that in on speed day, because I like to keep the speed day, the quick and the fast, kind of lactate free. So we did it as a secondary movement on max effort day. Okay? Okay, so coaching stuff. Watch Sean, kind of how he pops off the box and his bar speed. So like this video is going to be something I think, yes, we would want to see when we were working with the lower percentages, like 30 to 40%. This is what we would want to see on the bar. All right, and then we'll go to the next one. Where'd my next one go? I lied. Remember the first one we saw? That was the lighter one. That was faster. That was about 50%. That was a little slower. I'll show you the difference here on these pulls. So this one's lighter. This is 3 plates. And this is not an exact percentage. This is just lighter for him, so I know it's going to be faster. So this is what I'm putting in closer to conference or nationals. They're big meet, right? We want to move this faster. Like I don't even know his deadlift max. Who cares? Move that shit fast. Okay? Quick, real quick. Now we'll throw a plate on. So this would be something you'd want to see in your off season when you're between 50 to 60%. A little heavier, but still pretty good speed. But it is slower. Okay? And also, the first video was 3 plates. If I got to do 10 sets of 2 with 3 plates, that's way less taxing than 10 sets of 2 with 4 plates. Right? So don't do the 4 plates when we're trying to get that kid ready for nationals. Right? We want to get the stimulus. And that goes back to where I said the coach must train. Because otherwise you don't know that shit. Yeah?
So you're using a deadlift bar in your training. Before you let them use the deadlift bar, do you use like a regular Texas power bar to teach how to brace and get tighter against the bar before you use the bar to lift up and forward?
No. But that's a good question. He asked, we're using a deadlift bar. He asked, do I use a regular bar to teach them to learn how to brace better and get tension into the bar before they pull? We only had like 2 deadlift bars, and I saved it for our bigger guys because I felt like it takes some wear and tear off of your arms. Doing that speed work can get kind of taxing, but that's not a bad idea, really. But it was just an equipment issue. I never even thought about that.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah. I'll quote you. Repetition method. So you're in a group setting or you got a bunch of people, you're trying to get through the workout, have time limitations. Keep it fast paced. That goes back to teaching them how to train. Okay? So if I'm in a group with 2 other guys, as soon as the guy in front of me is off, I'm on there, right? I want to make those 2 guys lean on shit by the time we're done working out because I'm pushing the pace, right? If you can teach your kids that, like I said, you're taking a lot of work off your hands. Supersets, timed work worked well. Repetition method is just work, okay? Now, hopefully you'll get them to a point where you can prescribe 4 sets of 8, 4 sets of 10. But if they're a group that you got to push through and they're not sure how to train yet, do timed work, sets of 30 seconds, okay? Cluster sets, these worked real well for some reason. We did, with women's basketball, we started out 3 minutes, okay, and there was a group. Each person did a different movement, but you stayed in your group, and we would go 3 minutes, and every 10 seconds or so I would say go. And they would just, whatever their movement was, they would do 3 to 5 reps, and they had to hold on to it. And then we would do that for 3 minutes. So it was go, 10-second rest, go, all right? So by the end of the 3 minutes, it was a lot of work, okay? But that's what most young lifters need, is time under tension and more work. So it worked out well. Alicia, am I doing okay? You had to tell them the pizza was here, didn't you? No one even looked back there. Real quick, different programming options. I like to, if you can, split up your max effort work. So like a lot of times we would do max effort upper on Monday. A lot of people like to do legs on Monday. I don't think that's a good idea, because if I come in and we have a hard ass lower body day, they still have to go to practice the rest of the week. Or if I'm just a lifter, I still have to lift the rest of the week. So this worked pretty good, like heavy upper on Monday, your 2 dynamic days in the middle, and then that's a typo. That should say lower, so like your heavy lower on Friday, and then you got the weekend to recover. But that's not always your situation, right? Just as an example, so everything's going to be different, right? So what I just told you was for our throwers off season. This is our throwers in season. Sunday max effort lower, Monday max effort upper. So I just did what I said don't do, but it's in season, and our priority is to be ready to go on the weekend. So that's why I'm pairing these 2 things up early in the week. And then they have a day off, and then like you mess around with your volume on your dynamic stuff, and they're ready to go on the weekend. Because in the off season, we built up their training capacity where this is not a big deal. Okay, they can come in and knock out 6 sets of speed lower and not be affected on the weekend. Okay, or if they are, it's a little bit, right? Like they got to, track kids got to be ready for 1 meet a year, really, if you think about it, or maybe a couple at the end. I mean, most in-season stuff is 2 days a week. You can do it different ways. You can go, so you can think about it, athletes are weak, they're already fast, I'm going to do just max effort in season. And then their accessory work. So we go back to the plug and play stuff, right? It might just be 2 max effort days, accessory work, done. Or you may have a situation where the max effort work is kicking their ass. So we're going to do dynamic work and then accessory work, right? 2 workouts a week. The speed work worked very well for us. We had 2 teams, divers. Coach didn't want them on heavy stuff. So I said, well, what about just speed work, and then we'll do our accessories. And we did this with wrestlers too, because for whatever reason they were having a tough time recovering. So the majority of the season was spent doing dynamic work and accessory work. And then we tested them postseason, and almost all the kids were within 90% of their max from preseason when we tested them and they were supposed to be at their strongest. So with low-level athletes or lifters, because their training age is so low, you can maintain, or you know, sometimes even build strength with just speed work and the accessory work, okay? And save, like Buddy talked about, their practices are max effort, okay? But then like with the max effort stuff, you also have high school kids that can handle doing some heavy work early in the week, right? And they'll be fine for practice. So every situation is going to be different, but those are just different things to think about. Okay, why is strength so important? It takes years to get truly strong. You can get in shape in a couple months. Okay, right? So why are we running kids all damn year long? You know, what's your priority? Where are you within your year or your training cycle? Okay, think about these things. If you're strong, everything else is easier. Right, JP? But seriously, you know, it's true. I don't know what else to say. Okay, so an example. People want to knock on the system. It's for power lifters. It's not for athletes. They're out of shape. They can't handle work. All this other fucking shit. Okay, here we go. Freshman thrower, 600-pound squat. We're going to talk about dynamic work right now. He was a 675-pound deadlifter. Okay? talking about training load. So his typical workout would be speed squats, 335 pounds bar weight, 4 chain per side, that's 525 at the top. You don't really need to remember that, but for 8 sets of 2, okay? With 45 seconds rest between each set. Then he goes right to a deficit speed pull, where he's standing on a 1/2-inch mat. Did 315 straight weight for 10 sets of 2. He was talking a little shit, and he wanted to do like a rep set after all the speed work. He's like, give me a number. So I go 20. He knocks out 20 reps, and they're all fast. Like if he wanted to go to actual failure, he would have been knocking on 30, 40. So all those reps, just cranked them out, and each one was explosive. Then we did typical accessories, just like another day. Like I talked about Cal Dietz, talking about your training is up at a certain level. Like this is where we're at, right? Just another day, it's nothing extraordinary. So I sat down and calculated what he did. Back to Dave talking about workload. On his squat, he did 7,700 pounds of work. On his pulls, he did 7,300 pounds of work. This was 15,000 pounds, all fast and explosive reps, done in under 20 minutes. That's a lot, right? Don't tell me that's not gonna help a football player, it's not gonna help a wrestler, it's not gonna help a tennis player. If it's a female tennis player and all that stuff is scaled down, you can't tell me it's not gonna help them because it's all fast and explosive reps, right? Now let's take an Olympic example and kind of go against that. Hang clean. Let's be generous and say they're gonna do 270 pounds, 75 pounds for 10 sets of 2. That's 5,500 pounds of work. 15 reps would be more common, right, in a program. I don't think a lot of Olympic variant programs run 20 total reps. So we're looking at 15 total reps, right? But we're gonna be generous, we're gonna give him 5,500 pounds. We're gonna assume that he can actually do this. And then we're gonna do a hang snatch, 10 sets of 2. We're gonna be generous again, say that he can do 2 plates. Probably really couldn't. We'll say that that's 4,500 pounds. Total work done was 10,000 pounds, and there's no way you're doing all these Olympic variants in 20 minutes. It ain't gonna happen. You can't do it. You will fail, right? There's no way you're gonna be able to do those movements with that little amount of rest and have the weight, the amount of weight moved anywhere close to that. So there's some science for you. But my point is, your dynamic method can build work capacity at the same time, okay? So there's another sport-specific term that we can throw out the window. I don't know why that's there. We might be done. How are you guys doing? Okay. We have some questions. Geared, how do you do it? Geared versus non-geared for your accessory work. I don't think it has to be that different. I think the difference between geared and non-geared mainly needs to be on your not max effort work. Needs to be geared how often you're using a box. I think that's the big thing. If you're non-geared lifter, you're gonna have to use the box less. Or if you're gonna use it a lot, you can still do well, but once you get closer to your meet, you have to come back to less box work. Does that make sense? Because it's definitely different. That's why we use the box. We use the box because we can recover from it faster, right? Like I know, like I'm primarily a box squatter. I know if I go free squat for a few weeks, I'm gonna get my ass kicked. It's hard, it's different, okay? So if you're a lifter, I think the main differences in your programming need to be how often the box is in there. Okay, not so much your accessory work, because you're just bringing up the muscle groups. How do I run groups, 16 racks and 60 athletes? That's actually not too bad. Right? Because we have 16 racks, we have 60 athletes, we can go about 4 athletes per rack and just roll through your accessory work. And on max effort work, if you have large groups, just push them through. They don't need to rest 3 to 5 minutes, right? They should be able to produce some force with a short amount of rest period anyways. So just move their ass. And that goes back to teaching them how to train. And it's just organization, right? You may have to do stations, you may have to do circuits on your accessory work, but it can be done. So early on, it's gonna take more planning, but as you go and your kids learn how to train, like you can kind of let them go and they'll push through. Which bands do you use? Somebody asked me which bands to use. So like I said, In our off season, typically we would go 50% bar weight. Our accommodating resistance would be 25%. If you're like me and you hate math and percentages, as soon as I hear that shit, like my brain turns off. I have tables. I think I did an article with tables that shows what bands and chains to use on each strength level. So like I said, you have to scale it earlier. Scale it down, it breaks it down for you. And then peaking, we would increase the band tension, like I talked about. I'll get to that in a second. Raw lifters, single ply, multiply, adaptations. Again, I think the big thing is how much you're using the box. Okay, I think that's gonna be the biggest difference. And just get used to your gear. So off season we can train general, and then as I get closer to a meet and I got a meet coming up, then I gotta get more specific. That's the big thing. I'm doing some stuff with some raw guys right now. We're doing all our heavy work on a box, and then most of our speed work is without the box. Okay? It's working pretty well. We'll see. I'll let you know for sure, but I think it's going to work real well because the free squatting kind of beats you up more, right? So if we go lighter weight and hit that on our speed days, I think we can keep the skill ingrained and do a good job with their strength, and they'll get a strength boost from the box squat because they're going to train their hips more because the feet are out wide. Now, if you're a raw lifter and you train off a box all the time, you may have to bring your feet back in a little bit when it's getting closer to meet time. I know I would. I'm not squatting out here without some fucking briefs on. No. General population, like I said earlier, plug and play, and just make your movements very simple. Just the way the system is set up, you're going to help them out because everything is set up for success, right? It's going to be better than what they're doing, right? Like I talked about, if you teach your kids to accelerate the weight, they're going to be way ahead of a lot of people. Circa max for raw and athletes, yes. I think it's good for a power lifter. I think you can do it. The way I would adjust it is I would probably run it without a box, and I'd probably drop the band percentages down a little bit because it's going to be harder, okay? And when you're raw, you're getting less support from gear in the hole, right? So we want more of that regular weight on us while we're in the bottom. Now for athletes, we did this a lot at the end of the year when we were trying to peak for something. Not so much for a strength gain, but for a neurological stimulus. So if they were training 25% of band tension most of the year, so let's say they were on average bands most of the year, when we went to run a circa max, we would almost double that. So that would be 150 if it was average bands. So we might like throw like blue bands on top of it, right? So 350, 150. So basically bump them up a band level and then just have them max out. Like whatever they get, but work up to a 1 rep max. But the neurological stimulus from that, so then we would drop them down into their competition and let them recover. And it seemed to work pretty good. The feedback we got was good. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Strength is going to help you. Keep in mind, you need to get stronger, okay? But don't take away from your sport. Be good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when you need to be good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When you're over here off season, get stronger. Raise your weaknesses. Somebody asked me what the hell is speed work? It's a dynamic effort method. I'm not sure what they were asking. If that was you and you want to ask me later, go ahead. All right, thank you. That's my contact information. Email me if you want the slides. Let me know if you have questions, all right? Thanks.